Hello, my name is Nikola Burazer, and you're watching Screening by European Western Balkans at the Belgrade Security Conference 2024. Our guest is Mr. Veton Surroi, a journalist and writer from Kosovo and the founder of the Koha di Tore newspapers in Kosovo. Mrs. Surroi, let me start with a very general question. What is your take on the current perspective of the Serbia-Kosovo normalization process? Do you see that there is political will on the two sides to actually move forward?
I think it is a good time to reflect on what the future, how the future lies ahead, actually. We are at a stage of historical transformations. It is an age of geopolitics in which there's a war in Ukraine and an intensified war in the Middle East and possibilities of conflagrations in other places. And therefore, the war in Ukraine and the way the war in Ukraine will end, the way the West, after the US elections and after the German elections, will find a new narrative in addressing all of these crises, will greatly influence the way further for the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. The Kosovo-Serbia dialogue reached a peak with the Brussels Ohrid Agreement, and that peak was stalling for a significant period of time. And now we are at a stage in which Kosovo and Serbia need to be understood from the point of view of stability of Europe, and therefore to re-engage with new emphasis.
What are your expectations of the second mandate of Donald Trump towards Serbia-Kosovo normalization? Do you believe, as some say, that Vučić has reasons to celebrate, while Kurti has reasons to lament the victor Donald Trump?
Fortunately, despite the problems that we have, the problems between Kosovo and Serbia are diminutive in comparison with crises in the world. And therefore, a lot of the attention of the international community, a lot of the oxygen is consumed by these other crises. And therefore, I don't believe, and this is not something that happens with President Trump coming to office, this is actually something that has happened throughout this century. After 9/11, the peaks of crises have moved eastwards. And therefore, the attention has moved Iraq, Afghanistan, and now the pivot to Asia in Western policy. So I think whatever attention the U.S. administration can give to Kosovo-Serbia dialogue would be probably in unison with European policy. The problem with both of these is that they have reached their peak. So there needs to be new energy and new ideas.
And do you believe that the idea of border changes, which was, let's say, on the table during Trump's last presidency, will once again emerge as one of the options for resolving the Serbia-Kosovo dispute?
I think it's a bit unfair to create a relationship with President Trump and border land swap, the land swap idea. I think it originated in the region itself. To a great extent, it was supported by Madame Mogherini at the time, which was a blatant failure of EU policy. And so by the time it reached the US administration via the National Security Council, it was already a baked idea. So I don't think that there will be an imposition of ideas that have had their expiry date.
Speaking of elections, we have one more elections coming up, and these are elections in Kosovo. What should we expect from these elections, the victory of Albin Kurti, and in that case, what could we expect from his next term as prime minister?
I think the question is whether Prime Minister Kurti will govern with a full majority mandate, as he has now, or whether he will have to share power with other party or parties to create a coalition. This is a question that the voters will decide. I think in general, what we will expect, I mean, we have a rather predictable policy both in Serbia and in Kosovo. And that may hinder the dialogue, that may help the dialogue if we know that we have in both countries people who actually have a full mandate to negotiate.
One of the main obstacles to Serbia-Kosovo normalization is the question of the association of Serb majority municipalities. Why do you believe there is such strong opposition to this idea in Kosovo, having in mind that it is a commitment of Kosovo on the one hand, and on the other hand, it is a rather weak, let's say, kind of autonomy which is imagined in the association?
Well, the ASMM has been has reached a point of totem for
This is exactly why I ask this.
for both societies. I think if we rationalize about it, we get to a point in which the association is a right. People have the right to associate. They don't have the obligation to associate. So we need to bring back this issue to the people, which is the municipalities. There ought to be free municipal elections for the first time in the history of that part of Kosovo and in the four northern municipalities in October of next year. Before that, a big test will be for the parliamentary elections in February, which the Kosovar Serbs need to participate in order to gain their voice and in order to gain the right to articulate their needs in the parliament. I've been telling, I was an activist myself, protesting and whistling and carrying protest cards. And I tell Kosovo Serbs who are doing this 30 years later, it's very important when the opportunity is to actually gain power, gain political power, and articulate your needs through political power.
How do you see the multi-ethnic future of Kosovo and the position of Kosovo Serbs? How do you believe that the best way to integrate them into the Kosovo society?
I think it's the best way, well, I think it's very important that the Serb identity in Kosovo be not only protected and not only the notion of protecting something, but actually developed. And so the protection is one category. It deals with monuments, etc. The development of identity means developing further culture, presence, education, and these can be done in a vibrant society. And the preconditions for that are there. I think that the Kosovo Serbs, and mind you, we're speaking of a Western Balkans which is losing a lot of its youth in general. But it is very important for the Kosovo Serb society to try to project their future today in Kosovo, and doing it in a way of thinking, projecting the future by thinking of a Serb presence in Kosovo, about Serb identity in Kosovo. Not about how somebody else thinks Serb identity is in Kosovo. Many people in Serbia speak about Kosovo without knowing Kosovo, without ever having lived in Kosovo, or without ever having visited Kosovo. So they cannot uh, think about a future without actually being there. You cannot prescribe futures to other regions. Even here in Serbia, you cannot in uh, in Zaječar project the future of Novi Sad. You have to think. It's Novi Sad people who have to think about it. Um, so I think it is it's a crucial moment in which people try to assume responsibilities for the future, and they have to do it in a political action.
And how do you see the actions of the Kurti government in the last couple of years in the north of Kosovo? These actions have angered the international community, the partners of Kosovo worldwide, and the Serbian community. Apparently won him some, let's say, support in Kosovo itself. But what are the long-term actions, the consequences of these actions for the position of Serbs in Kosovo and the normalization process as such?
Um, well, we have to know what happened in the past years. We have had a um, we have had a period in which forms of conflict, including trying to create a security vacuum on the one side or trying to create a paramilitary incursion on the other, were the key elements that determined. And so uh, we've had 2 years of, or 3 years of not a very normal behavior that can be dealt with in political and not security terms. So there was a heavier security presence uh, in these parts of this part of Kosovo, and one of the biggest reasons for this has been withdrawal of uh, Kosovo Serbs from institutions. The question now, of course, is not how do we address these past 2 years, but how do we address creating legal and legitimate institutions in the four municipalities. And legitimate means basically that they have the full support of the people of these four municipalities, and how to de escalate, not in the sense of reducing this, or, you can reduce as many policemen as you want, but the question is not how to reduce. The question is how do you create a security presence that is legitimate in the north. And I know of no other way of creating a legitimate security presence in the four northern municipalities other than the Kosovo Serbs going to the Kosovo Police Academy, becoming Kosovo police officers, and taking care of the community. Um, I think within a year, if there were sufficient will in both sufficient political will to support this, I think the Kosovo Serb community in the north, in the northern municipalities, could create sufficient members of Kosovo police force who would be a legitimate security presence in which the people would trust.
Finally, one topic which seems to be absent from any discussions about normalization recently is reconciliation. How can we expect to have peace and normalization without reconciliation, and if Serbs and Albanians continue seeing each other as enemies?
Well, we need to get, and this is a very big question, and this will probably require both leadership and a generational change. Not a change, but a leadership that will lead to a change in thinking that will affect the whole generation. And the big question is how do we get out from narratives of war into a culture of peace? And this is a big challenge for societies. Even if there were even if we finished a conflict today, even if Kosovo and Serbia agreed to everything today, we would still be stuck with our societies who were year after year built grown in a culture of war. And so we have to think in both of our societies of how to create culture of peace.
Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for watching us.
Thank you.